Welcome to Co-op Guild. This is Steve with a review for Uprising Curse of the Last Emperor by Nemesis Games. Note, we will provide a review copy of this game. Uprising Curse of the Last Emperor is a fully cooperative 4X game with a fantasy theme. Players will be taking on the role of a unique faction controlled by a unique hero, trying to score more points than both enemy factions in the game. Yes, there are actually two enemy factions in this game, Chaos and the Empire. Through the course of the game, players will be exploring the world, completing quests, purchasing magical items, building cities and armies, and battling against the enemies in the game. The game is played over the course of 2 to 4 chapters, and if all players in the game score more points than the Empire and Chaos, everybody wins the game. Let's start breaking down this game, starting with setup and cleanup. So this is a big 4X game, which means it has lots of moving pieces, lots of table space it takes up, and generally takes a longer time, which, for a 4X game is very common. So it's going to rank a little bit lower just by that standpoint. Now, it does do some nice things to help along with this process. It has some really nice inserts in the game itself to keep everything organized. It's actually pretty easy to pack up and put away from that standpoint. It just takes a little while to bring out all the different decks you need, shuffle them up, and lay them out. Not a painful process, it just takes some time. Now, one thing I really liked about this is they did design faction-specific trays, meaning that if I want to play one of the many factions in the game, I can grab that one tray and it has all the pieces I need and all the cards for that faction. It's a really great idea. I love that aspect of this. The other thing that's really nice is this is a standee-based game. All the pieces in the game are standees, with one exception. You can upgrade the curses to miniatures if you want, but that's completely optional. And the nice thing about the standees is it doesn't take that much space when you're trying to store it, or even put things back in standee in the faction trays. It is very, very nice from that standpoint. But I will mention, because it's a 4X game, it is a table hog, so you have a lot of space on your table, be a lot of things spread out around the board, lots of decks. I do recommend one of the optional purchases, their faction organizer trays they created, which you can put the faction board on there and all your pieces and hold your cards up. That will help a lot from the table organizational standpoint. Moving on to components and quality of the game. Honestly, this is very impressive. They did a great job with just the quality of everything they chose in this. I'm a sleever. I like to sleeve cards. I want to protect stuff. And the card quality, I thought, in this game was excellent. And I do not feel the need to sleeve these cards at all. They do get shuffled, but they don't get shuffled a ton. So there's not a whole lot of wear from that standpoint. But I really, really like that. The standees themselves are really nice colored acrylic. They're not a clear acrylic, which is something I generally prefer. But for this, they are colored based upon the faction, which I think was a really smart idea. Because when you're looking at the board, it's very easy to tell at a glance which standee is for which army or faction out there. And that made a huge difference when playing the game. The upgraded components, honestly, if you do like this game, you feel like you want to get that additional bling, they have a lot of options for like taking the activation tokens and making them into these really awesome metal coins, which are really, really cool. Even the wooden pieces for the resources are great. Completely optional, like I said, but even the game as it comes normally, everything was really, really nice. No issues here when it comes to component quality and artwork. Fantastic job here. Learn the game. This is a 4X game, which means there's a lot of rules generally, a lot of things to learn and pick up on this. But for a 4X game, very good job on this one, in my opinion. The rulebook has an excellent index, which helps a lot when looking up rules. It was pretty easy to use. The rulebook itself isn't that big. It's actually pretty small, and it's organized pretty well. It's easy to follow along and learn from that standpoint. There's a lot of player guides, which help a lot. But the big thing, and this I can't stress this enough, is the faction board. So when you play this game, you will choose a faction to play. And it'll lay this out in front of you, and it'll have space for all your cities you can play out, all the armies and the units you can build throughout it. And it has a space on the side where it has your actions listed. And this is so useful for learning the game for the first time, because all your actions are right there in front of you, and you will mark them with these action tokens when you take them, and it's all spelled out in words, so you can easily understand what it does. And even for some of the unique factions, it would have different variations to how they play, it's all right there in front of you, which is excellent. It makes it so much easier for people to learn the game. When I'm teaching people, it's like, don't worry about all this stuff. When you get down to doing actions, just look in front of you, everything's right there, and it honestly helps a lot. There's also some really nice guides throughout the board itself, which remind you what the different stats are for different things. So really great job here. The other thing that's really nice too is the phase structure for the chapter is printed right there, so it's easy to follow along as you play the game. The great job here. The one thing I would mention is while it has a lot of really nice guides, I probably would like to have one more guide for some of the expansion material, because sometimes I do have to look in the book for that, but being able to pull that out into a card would help a ton. Next thing is the engagement. So this one ranks a little bit lower. It's not too bad, but running through all the phases in the game, because there's lots of phases, can take some time. And so there's a section of the game where players take their actions. That's really fun, and generally everyone's really engaged in that point. The other phases of the game, you are revealing events, setting up the board, you are building stuff, which is fine because you're engaged trying to figure out what you can do there. Some upkeep stuff too, with keeping track of things. Not anything major, but there is some time when you won't be actively making decisions in that standpoint. But the nice thing is the player turns are actually very quick in this one. In this one, there are 2 actions you could take a lot of, but they're very quick. It's just moving your hero around or making trades. And the bulk of the actions, you can do one of those, and then the next player takes their turn. And you wait for it to come back around, and then you can do your actions as well. So they did an excellent job making sure that everyone takes pretty quick actions while moving along to the next player. Now, the one thing about this engagement that can be a detriment is the combat itself. And I say that because usually combat's pretty quick to resolve, but it is a dice-based combat system. So sometimes you might be rolling dice, and maybe you whiffed and the enemy whiffs, and you just re-roll again. And that could happen a few times. It happens due to luck, but usually it doesn't happen a lot. But you can run into situations where maybe combat takes a little bit longer than anticipated. Also, if 2 enemy factions are battling each other, which can happen in the game because the enemies do not like each other in the game, which is a really cool feature of the game. Players aren't involved in that. You're just rolling dice and see what happens, which enemy faction comes out on top. Let's move on to decision space. So there's lots to do in your turn for this one. This is a 4X game. There's a lot of options there. You can explore, you can move your armies around, you can go questing, buy magic items. Lots of fun stuff to do. And that's not including all the different feats you can do and other magic items you might pick up, which gives you additional abilities, which are really fun to explore in this game. I personally like the quests themselves. I think these are really cool. They're varied and interesting in how you approach them. And they do push you towards different strategies, because if you're in a specific location, you will get a bonus to trying to complete that quest, and it makes thematic sense. For example, maybe there's a council, and then the council card might say, if you're with other heroes, you will get a bonus die for this attempt, which makes sense because you're at a council, you're working together, you're having this discussion at the table. Very awesome idea. It doesn't lock you into having to do that, but it incentivizes you to do that for thematic purposes. Love, love, love that. The magical items are very cool in this game. However, I have run into some situations where not every character can use every item, and sometimes the items out there no one can use. This is more prevalent in lower player count games and higher player count games, because as long as there's one item somebody wants, they can buy that item and it gets immediately replayed. So it's generally not a big deal. The other thing I'll mention too is there's a lot of effects in the game that can sweep, or you can discard any of the magic items you don't want to replace them with new ones. So even when you have the situations where there's magic items you cannot use, there's usually some options out there, but you will run into that on occasion. But the one thing I really like the most about Decision Space is it comes down to the card combos. There's so many different synergies and combos you'll come across with what your faction can do, what features you have, what magical items are out there, sometimes what quests you come across. And they will develop into fun stuff like, oh man, if I can build these towers and walls on my cities easier, but then I can also discard those instead of my units to protect them from damage. There's a little combo already going. Can I leverage that even more with different things I find? Very, very cool. Really enjoy exploring the different options as it comes out in this game. Let's talk about variety. Honestly, variety here is excellent. This is a big win for this game. Each faction has multiple heroes and feats, meaning that like if even if I play the same faction multiple times, which has the same units, you can choose between 2 heroes for each faction, and they play very differently. They each have their own starting feats, which are different, and they have different feats within their decks, which the feats are basically different powers and abilities they can activate. And the order of which they come out change how you play as well. So just a variety within the faction is very cool. The market is huge, meaning there's tons of magical items available to you, and you'll see different ones each time you play the game. The quest is also a ton of quests as well. You will see different ones popping up as in addition to that. The Nemesis, there's a lot of that. There's just a lot of everything in this game. The tiles as well, you'll explore those and have different effects. And so even if you play the exact same faction, exact same setup, everything shows on your side, the fact that between the magical items, the nemesis that pop out, the hexes, and the quests, those will provide a unique combination of game experience each time. Now, with this, as normally comes with a lot of variety, sometimes you come into a weird combination, which can have some interesting effects, what makes it maybe extra hard to deal with something, or maybe a little bit easier to deal with something. By and large, the experiences you have is going to be really awesome and fun. I think they did an excellent job with variety in this game. And finally, let's talk about cooperation. So there's a couple things you can do in this game for cooperation. The main thing is the ally card. So if you're a cooperative player in this game, this is a must-buy for you. What these are just a separate deck of cards, and they will add a new starting card for each hero. What this means is each hero in the game starts with 2 abilities, and this adds a third one that is purely a cooperative ability. It only affects other players, and it is really fun to use. So that is a must-buy. The other things you can do in this game is you can go and you can trade stuff. So if your heroes are together, you can trade resources or items or fun stuff like that. You can potentially hire mercenaries and have them join the other army, which is really cool. The big thing, though, that kind of drops the cooperation for me is you cannot actually fight together. Meaning I can't move my armies into your space with a city and protect it, or we can't join our armies together to fight a big bad guy together. So that kind of drops the cooperation a little bit for me. I would love to be able to do that. And there's not a whole lot you can do on other players' turns to help them. There's a few things, of course, but there's not a lot from that standpoint. So the cooperation, it drops a little bit from those factors, but it is really fun. And the big thing is, at the end of the game, being able to spend your resources to give people points is a really awesome idea to really help those people who might be struggling to get some points, like me, when I'm playing my wife, for example. And it's really nice to feel that camaraderie from that standpoint. Let's talk about who would like this game. So this is a 4X game, but it has a fantasy twist to it. So obviously people who like fantasy themes and 4X, this is probably your jam. Now, if you don't like 4X games, and 4X games for me generally are like civilization games where you're building up nations and building cities, managing economies, technology stuff like that, you might still like this game because it has that fantasy twist to it, meaning it's removing all that, and instead you're substituting magical items and quests and stuff like that, and you might like that more than the standard 4X approach. Now, the game does take a long time to play, so this is for people who do like longer games. And honestly, the 4-chapter experience is by far the best experience, but you can play shorter games with the 2 chapters. You do need a lot of table space for this one. But for people who like variety and finding combos, this is a big win from that standpoint. And of course, you do need to be okay with unlucky rolls or lucky rolls and potentially cards that come out and feel initially harsh at first, but then you can don't mind the challenge of trying to figure out how to overcome those effects. And now we're on to final thoughts. As a reminder, we did get a review copy of this game. Now, personally, I love this game. This game is super fun. I am a sucker for 4X games, and initially when I saw this, I wasn't sure what to think about it because I am accustomed to the standard 4X games with technology trees and civilization tracks and armies, all that fun stuff to manage. And this very much has a different twist to it with that fantasy theme. The one thing that I really like about this is variety and combos. I love those things in games, and this has plenty of both of those. The variety is excellent. I can play the exact same setup many times in a row and feel very different each time. But with all the different factions, I wouldn't really do that. I definitely want to play all the factions in this game, keep switching around. It's so much fun to try new things out. The combos are there. The combos don't really show up until later in the game, hence why I mentioned being able to play at longer periods. And so this is a game that I like setting up on my table and coming back to it over the course of a couple days to play through it. One thing I didn't like about this game initially was the dice rolling in this, because initially how they worked out, you can roll the dice and there basically wasn't any mitigation from that standpoint. So you could roll bad or good, and then that was it. Now, when the expansions added advanced druids, this changed the game for me. This was a huge improvement for me because normally I'm okay with luck in the game, but I always want some form of mitigation. And the advanced druids were added, and they have a new resource which you can spend to reroll your dice roll, which is excellent, and also use their powers, which adds to the combat strategies in the game. So this was a huge win, and honestly pushed this one into the big positive for me. Now, there's lots of levers to pull, so I really like tweaking what type of experience I want. And the game has a very robust design, so it's very flexible for that. So if there's something in this game you don't like, it's actually pretty easy to just tweak it. In fact, the rules have a lot of different setups for difficulties, so it even shows in the rulebook how flexible it is. And like I said, it's just a very robust design, so an excellent design game from that standpoint. Now, I will mention that I have played with others who have felt hopeless as they played through it, just because with the flip of cards, it feels like you just are getting beat down because the game doesn't pull punches, for sure. This is a difficult game, but it is very satisfying, and I guarantee you a lot of those punches that are being thrown at you, you can't overcome them. It just takes a little bit of time to manage the system and find a way to push back against it. Now, another thing I would like to see in the future for this one is being able to play a single faction. As it stands now, if you want to play solo, you have to manage two factions, and I'm always a person who, while I don't mind playing two-handed in games, I always prefer to associate with one faction or one character in the game. And so hopefully in the future we'll have that option. But as it stands now, I really like this game, Uprising Curse of the Last Emperor. Awesome one. I do recommend this one. If you like 4X games, go check it out. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time at the Co-op Guild. Bye-bye.